Well, one of the areas of Baptist work that goes on is through chaplaincy, and we have a number of Baptist chaplains in hospitals across South Wales. And I'm delighted to be joined by one of them now. Alex, welcome to you. Could you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about where you work?
Yes, delighted to be with you. Thank you for inviting me. My name's Reverend Alex Anderson, and I work for the NHS in the Swansea Bay University Health Board. And I'm based in Morriston Hospital at the moment, but I also make visits to Singleton Hospital, Neathbert Talbot, and Kevin Coyd as well. We have services to those hospitals too.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I know that you started around April last year, so right really at the height of the pandemic. Can you tell us, what was it like starting as a Baptist chaplain at that particular moment?
It was crazy, I have to say. And there were moments when I did think I'd made a huge mistake, because I'd come from a relatively safe environment as Associate Minister of Mumbles Baptist Church, and I'm very, very grateful to them for inviting me to be their Associate Minister. But I did feel that God was calling on to chaplaincy, but obviously nothing had prepared me for what I was to witness and what I was to see. That very first day I started on the 14th of April in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I recall that on day one, I was sent upstairs to be fit tested. And that simply means you are taught how to put on all the protective equipment, your visor, your mask, which has to be absolutely airtight around your nose and mouth so that nothing can get in and nothing can get out. I know, it's crazy, but you do survive it. Then you've got to cover absolutely everything that's exposed, everything. Otherwise, you could be walking, COVID-19 bacteria out of wards. So day one, there was a very sick young man, very sick patient. We were called in to pray over this patient every day, asked by the family to do that, and we did. And very sadly, in that very first week I started, that patient sadly passed away. And that was my first week as a chaplain. It was a baptism of fire, I have to say. It was very, very challenging indeed.
Yes. Very hard times to come into that. Now, obviously, at the minute, we're hearing a lot about the increasing rates of coronavirus and the pressure that the NHS is under and hospitals. But from your perspective, what's it like? How does January 2021 compare to the peak of the first wave back in April, May time?
Yes, well, I think back in April, there was very much a sense of camaraderie. We're in this together. There was much more of a sense of positive energy, I think. I don't think any of us imagined that in January 2021 we would still be in it. And so there was a kind of optimism, if you like, more energy. People were being drafted in from other hospitals to help, and there was a much more sort of cheerful, if you like, sort of Second World War sort of environment. We felt we were in a war and we were fighting this together. This time round, the atmosphere is heavier. There's a weariness, a tiredness, and you can see it in the faces of the nurses and the doctors after their shifts, which are sometimes 14, 15 hours long in highly intense environments where they've got to be alert all of the time. Back in April in ITU, we had one nurse per patient. Now we're looking at one nurse per 2 or 3 patients. And we've now opened a new ward that's been specially made for COVID patients. In the first wave, we didn't have to use that ward. Now it's full to capacity. Yes. So that's the big difference, the difference in mood, I think. But in one sense, that makes more of I think, a fertile field, if you like, for us to come in, to be of more support, of spiritual support, pastoral support as well, because quite a lot of people don't really have a faith that they can name, but they know they need somebody. and sometimes they'll pass by and they'll say to us, could you pop one upstairs for me? Could you say a prayer to him upstairs for me today? Because I just don't think I can do it today. And things like that, even though maybe they've never been to church, they don't particularly have a faith, but they see us as the kind of bearers of God, if you like, the God presence in the hospital, which is a great opportunity. Yes.
And I imagine really valuable for people at times when they're having to face perhaps their own mortality, at times when
absolutely
life is thrown upside down, and looking for that outside source of comfort.
Absolutely, yes. I often get patients who perhaps have never really expressed any faith at all, and in those last days, particularly towards the end of their lives, they will ask those big questions. They'll want to know. They'll call a chaplain. I've often been at a bedside where they've asked me, what's next? Where am I going now? What can you tell me? And they want answers. Obviously, I'm not saying we have all the answers, but we can say a prayer for them. We can bring them some comfort. We can tell them what God is to us and what we believe will happen to us as believers. We can share our testimony. And it's a great opportunity to share with people who would never think of darkening the doors of a church, or talking to a Christian normally in normal circumstances. So yes, it's very, very challenging, very, very sad. There's a lot of sorrow to carry, but it's also a great opportunity to be able to offer the hope and the joy that Christ can bring into these sort of situations. Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing some of those experiences with us.
My pleasure.
How can we pray for you?
I think for strength. There's some days you go in and you feel, yes, I've got this, God's on my side, you're all prayed up and you're ready to go, and something awful happens, somebody dies that perhaps you've been ministering to for some weeks, and then, you suddenly feel the whole world crashing down. So strength, I think, God's strength to keep going. The sense of unity, I hadn't mentioned that I'm part of a team. There are 10 of us in all, and we're a very close-knit team. We can talk to each other if there's something troubling us, or we've had a particularly harrowing visit. We can pray together in the chapel, and we always start the day with prayer before we go onto the wards. So if you could pray for the team as well, that we would all bear up, we would all hold up, because it's been very, very challenging. Some of us have had to self-isolate. Some of us cannot go into the COVID wards because they've got, some of us have health issues, underlying health issues. So there are only a few of us that do go into the COVID positive wards. I'm one of them. So sometimes that can be a bit of a strain, because for things like on-call, I'm on call tonight and I'm on call this weekend, there are fewer of us to do the on-calls. So strength to get through that, really. And that the vaccination program will be rolled out as fast as possible. I had my first one on the 14th of December, and sadly my second one, which was supposed to be on the 2nd of January, was postponed. So I think the more of us that are vaccinated now, the sooner we can get back to some kind of normality. So prayer for that as well. And just that we can always remember to look for God, even in the most unlikely places.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Alex, thank you for sharing your experience of what is a very challenging time, but clearly so valuable as well. We'll be praying for you and for chaplains across our hospitals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.